This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello everyone. Just a little disclaimer from me, Tony. Before you listen to the first episode of Fight the Future Minute and our successive 100+ episodes talking about the X-Files movie minute by minute for the next few months. We have been recording these episodes all over the place for months now, going back probably until last summer, because anyone who knows me knows I plan way ahead. This means that the first few episodes of Fight the Future Minute, and quite a lot to come, were recorded before March 2020, which was of course when the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic broke out. What that means is that you're going to find a little bit of a disconnect on some of these episodes between when we recorded them and when you're listening to them. And given Fight the Future does concern the potential outbreak of an alien virus, it might seem a little bit strange that we don't actually talk about COVID-19 on a lot of the show. Partly this is because the X-Files is a separate entity. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with COVID-19, and we wouldn't want the show and these episodes to be clouded by something that's going on now and won't be going on forever. And, you know, there might be people listening to Fight the Future Minute in 10 years to come, if we're lucky, when hopefully COVID-19 will be a distant memory. But if you are listening right now, as in May, June, July 2020, and we're still in the middle of this crazy time, then please forgive us for the fact that some episodes you may hear references to the virus, to COVID-19, and in some you may not. So I just wanted to put a little disclaimer at the very top to let you know that yes, we're aware that Fight the Future Minute is airing in the middle of an unprecedented time for mankind, but Fight the Future Minute won't necessarily talk about it a great deal. So I'd just like to say on behalf of all the XCast team of podcasters who are going to be with you on this journey every day, hopefully now until August, we hope you're safe, we hope you're well, and we hope the same for all of your families going forward for the next few months until finally we can put this in the past, like the virus from Emasculata, or the alien virus, or the hantavirus, or all these things, and we can go back to a slightly normal, if still slightly paranoid world. Okay then, let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome everyone to the XCast. The truth is in here. My name is Tony Black, your host, and I am delighted to present the first episode of our special Fight the Future Minute podcast, in which myself and fellow co-hosts and guests will deep dive like we've never deep dived before, unpicking the 1998 first X-Files feature film, Fight the Future, 1 minute at a time. We'll be digging into our first minute very soon and beginning the journey, but we thought first it would make sense to discuss the project in a bit more detail, take a look at the genesis of where Fight the Future Minute came from, and also have a little bit of a chat about the original Fight the Future theatrical trailers that were knocking about before the movie came out. And joining me for this very first chat on our Fight the Future Minute podcast are my fellow XCast hosts and producers, Carl Sweeney and Sarah Blair. How you doing, guys?
Great.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
All right. I probably should preface this, and we've just been talking about this off air, but we are recording on what has to be the hottest day of the decade in the UK. Okay, for Sarah, it's a normal day, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just sitting in my comfortable air conditioning. Sorry, guys.
But it might mean that we have to have some windows open. So if you do hear like the occasional car in the background as we're talking, or something like that, I think it's worth it to prevent our premature deaths. Really.
Well, you guys should have just come over here to my house, and you know.
You know what? I've never been this close to naked on a podcast before. It's a scorcher, honestly.
Are you? Is it what? Is it a down to your pants scenario, Carl? Is it? I mean, what?
Well, I've got some shorts on, so Sarah remembers my 3/4 length shorts. I think.
Are they knickers or
pantaloon? I don't know. I can't remember what the difference was, but these are short shorts. Yeah,
capris?
Pantaloons. Let's go with that. Well, I'm keeping a t-shirt on at this stage, but it's all to play for. We've got a bit longer to go yet. Sarah, you can keep your clothes on. This is not a contractual obligation, okay? So it's absolutely fine.
I'm glad.
So yeah, this is minute 0 of the podcast. Obviously, the Xcast is something we're under the sort of umbrella of here, but Fight the Future Minute I kind of feel is going to be its own sort of mini sort of separate entity within the broader Xcast sort of thing, because it is going to be over the course of 3.5 months, really unpicking Fight the Future in an incredible amount of detail, and it's via the movies by minute format. So this is, for anyone who's not familiar, the movies by minute format was started by two guys who created the Star Wars Minute podcast some years ago, and they basically started a whole trend. So shout out to them in the first instance, because it came from those guys, this idea. And following that, they registered moviesbyminutes.com, and as it stands, there are 132 as of recording. There probably will be more by the time you listen to this, podcasts which unpick a film minute by minute, as I've said. So you've got everything from Goodfellas, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, Star Trek, Alien, you name it, it's been done, or it's been done. And this is from many of the classic movies that we know and love. So it's a subgenre that has really taken off over the last few years, and it's something that when we were approaching Fight the Future, and I thought, what are we going to do to celebrate the movie? It suddenly, as I was listening to some of these, it suddenly struck me, why don't we do it? Why don't we just unpick it? Because chances are not many other people are going to think to do this. So, the question is, guys, am I mad? Is this madder than the Podwatch? What are we doing?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great idea because, like you say, this trend of doing it's been going on for a while, and yeah, it really works well for stuff like Goodfellas, and I've been listening to one about Heat, which is really good too, 1 Heat minute.
That's done really well, that has, hasn't it? Because even
Michael
Mann has
on
been
for a couple of episodes, yeah. But I think it also works really well for this kind of thing, for a film from a franchise with like a devoted fan base, where we don't need an excuse to get obsessive, but we know there'll be people who'll go with us on this, So I think it's a great idea.
I think it's completely ridiculous. I don't know what we're doing, but I'm on for the ride.
Yeah. Well, this is it. I think it's one of those things where not everyone has necessarily heard of these minute by minute podcasts yet. I think they're sort of, if you're into podcasts and you listen to a lot of them, I think, and you're into pop culture and movies and things like that, I think you will have possibly picked up on it, or you might have heard of it. But it's new to a lot of people, so I think it's a subgenre that's really going to start to take off in the next few years, more and more. So I think we're on the cusp of getting involved at a really good time with this. So I mean, I'm excited. I mean, I will admit that this one we're doing isn't actually the first one that technically I've recorded. So we are recording sort of all over the place and out of order. So having done a few more, I think it works. It's a really good way of sort of digging deep into Fight the Future, because there is a lot to talk about with this film, and the more you do it, the more you find, actually.
Yeah, I felt that just from looking at the first few minutes ready for today, but just to think ahead, I also think the same will be true for I Want to Believe, actually. That I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think that's a film that will reward a bit of close viewing too. But anyway, that's another discussion, I think. But,
yeah.
No promises we're going to do I Want to Believe minute, but we'll see how this goes, and if I'm still alive by the end of it. I suppose then, before we talk a little bit about the trailer and stuff like that, and introduce Fight the Future, the way this is going to work with Fight the Future minute is that I'm not going to host all of them. Hosting duties are going to be shared between the three of us, between one or two other people as well. And we're going to get recurring guests for blocks. And the way I've worked it out on my insanely ridiculous spreadsheet is that the blocks roughly work out in terms of scenes or sequences. And you tend to find that equates to around anywhere between 3 to about 7 minutes, roughly, per sequence. So for instance, the three of us will be doing up to the point that I think Stevie falls through the hole in the cave in Texas, for example, which is about 6 or 7 minutes in. And then it will switch to somebody else, and they will do the chunk before we cut to the Dallas Federal Building when we see Terry O'Quinn and Mulder and Scully. So, and it will go on like that, and we'll have different people involved. So, in that sense, it should allow for some brevity and some format and, you know, different people's voices and things like that. And as a result, one of the first things I want to do when we get a new guest on is to ask them what their relationship is to Fight the Future, and also what they would give it out of 10. So let me put it to you guys then. I mean, before I answer that question, what would you go for? So when did you first see it, and what would you rank it? So Sarah, why don't you go first?
I saw it midnight showing the day it came out. Yeah, I was...
Ace, awesome.
I begged and begged and begged. Our radio station in Knoxville, where I'm from, was doing a special screening, and I tried for about 2 weeks. I was glued to the radio, dialing in, trying to get tickets, and I never could get through. And it was the day of the screening, and I was completely desperate. I had to get there to that screening, so I called the radio station and begged and begged and begged, and they took pity on me, apparently, and they had some extra tickets, and they gave them to me. So I went with my mom. Yeah, I'll never forget it. It was like one of the greatest things ever. But yeah, it was really cool. And it actually turned out years later, I was talking to my boyfriend at the time, who I eventually went on to marry. He was also in the audience at that time. So
no way.
Unknowingly, we're in the same theater at the same time watching the X-Files movie.
Destiny, yep. That is. I'm telling
meant to be.
Meant to be, 100%. Yeah. Carl, what about you? What's your first experience of the film?
Yeah, I saw it on, I believe, the Saturday, the day after it came out, basically. Warner Village Cinema in Preston.
Okay.
Which is it's still there, but it's changed hands. It's not called Warner Village anymore. I was only 11 at the time, and I think, if I remember rightly, Fight the Future was a 15 certificate.
Yeah, it was.
Do you know
yeah,
if that's right. Yeah,
I think so.
So I was concerned I wouldn't get in, essentially, but my dad took me. You know, I think I wore 2 pairs of socks to kind of make myself taller, I remember, to get into the screening. And it worked. I got in. I can remember it quite clearly. I remember there was a couple sat directly in front of me who were kissing passionately all through the trailers. The guy was just like bald, completely bald. I remember that.
It wasn't
so yeah, that's when I saw it.
Mitch Pileggi sneaks into screenings in Lancashire in the north of England. Yeah, obviously.
No bees in that cinema. So I remember it quite clearly, but I never went to see it again in the cinema. I know lots of people in America like to see films more than once, but I didn't do that with this film. I don't really do it that often, generally, to be honest. I feel like it's not as much of a thing over here. I don't know if you agree, Tony.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think your hardcore cinephiles would do, you know, but I think your common garden punter, they tend to go once. A lot of them don't even rewatch things. It's weird. The amount of people, like friends or, you know, even my wife, you know, they very rarely will rewatch something. It'll have to be years and years later, and then it will pop up on telly or whatever. So yeah, there's not a big rewatch culture. I didn't. I think I went twice. I remember the first time I went because I was 16, and it was the summer that we'd broken. We got it in August. It came out in the US in June, on June the 19th, I think, and we then got it in August. I can't exactly remember the exact date, but I was off school. I'd finished school, and I'd finished school like I was year 11, so I was 16, and I'd just finished my GCSEs. So we were waiting for GCSE results. I think this was the end of August. I think it was something like the 20th, Carl. I don't know if you remember the date.
I don't know.
20-something. I'll have to look that up. 20-something of August, I'm sure it was. Anyway, these days, they would have come out relatively far sooner to each other, because had we been in this culture, no way would we have gone 2 months with spoiler culture on the internet. Anyway, no chance. So, but I went with about 5 mates from school, almost none of whom watched the X-Files. There was one guy who did, because we used to go around each other's houses and watch the file tapes that you know, like we've talked about before, you know, like the file 6, you know, all that kind of thing. And so he had an idea, but he didn't follow it religiously like me. And I remember being on the bus going to the cinema in Birmingham city centre and trying to explain the mythology to them in about 20 minutes up to that point. Which you can imagine was a challenge. I think at the point where I started talking about how, you know, the Russian virus and the black oil, I think they were a bit like, what? So, but they seem to enjoy it, and I loved it. I thought I couldn't get enough of it. It was the movie event of the year for me, as I'm sure it was for you guys.
Yeah,
but
we actually had a $1 movie where it was a second run theater in our town, and so it was only $1 to get in. So I went and saw it about 5 or 6 times there. So I think I saw it a total of 8 times at the theater.
Amazing. I mean, now I'd kill to watch it again at the movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it is something that we've talked about trying to get going, isn't it, Carly? Trying to get a Fight the Future screening somewhere, and we might still try and do that at some point because I'd love to see that. But yeah, okay. What about out of 10 then? Like, maybe I'll just start with this and give you mine, and then we'll go from there. I think I would go for a solid 8 out of 10 myself. I don't think it's quite as great as some of the best mythology, episodes. We're not talking about on the scale of like the Anasazi trilogy. I think in terms of really sort of impactful mythology and telly, I think it's got it beat there. But this is high tier mythology for me. It would be in my probably top 5 of mythology episodes across the entire run. It's just a really well put together film. It's got a really clear storyline. It doesn't alienate new viewers. It's epic. It raises the stakes really well. David and Gillian are brilliant all the way through. They really up their game for this, even more than they're already ace. It's well written, well paced. It's got some great characters in it. I'm a big fan of it. I've always really loved this film. What about you guys?
I'm gonna be crazy and go for a 9.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the rewatchability is so high, and that's kind of how I number my things. But yeah, I'm gonna have to go for a 9 because I just watched it again for the first time in a while, and it's just so good. I was just gushing over, and yeah, it's really thrilling, and it's so cinematic and just big and epic. It's a fun thing. It's a fun film to watch.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm going to go for a 7. I'm not quite as fond of it as you two. Sorry, guys.
I knew you'd be more measured than us.
I kind of agree with what you said at the outset, Tony, that when I think of the best things that the X-Files has ever produced, I don't think Fight the Future is quite to that standard. And I think that the best things the X-Files ever did kind of like redefined television and are proper landmarks in TV history and things. Yeah. And I don't think Fight the Future can be considered like a landmark film or anything. I don't think it's on that level. So I agree with everything about you said. I think it's a lot of fun. They're having some fun. They got a bigger canvas to play with and stuff like that. But I don't think it would quite be in my mythology top 5. It would be a little lower. But that's not to say I don't enjoy this film a lot. And considering the logistical challenges of all the things they were doing at the same time, basically, I think it came out really well. No,
it did, and it was a challenge. All the stuff about how they produced, the film shows that they were doing it under some really sort of condensed stuff. They wrote it, and when they went on to Hawaii, Chris Carter and Frank Spotnitz over the Christmas period of '96. Now this came out obviously '98. They filmed it in '97, but they were writing it in between production of season 4 of the X-Files and season 1 of Millennium. So they were doing a lot of stuff with this early on, and they were having to write a whole feature film in the middle of producing 2 TV shows. I mean, I think they've talked about how they went on holiday, but they just worked the most intensive holiday ever. And considering, I think it comes out really well for the simple fact that they had to do it. Like some films, filmmakers spend years just prepping the script or production, design, and all this kind of thing. These guys were juggling about 3 different things at once. It's amazing that they did it to this quality,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, like you say, because these guys came out of television where you can't really afford to take that approach, can you? It's very much kind of get something on the can and move on. So, yeah, no, I agree. I think that maybe they were taking on too much, but you can't really blame them, can you? Because this is like the opportunity of a lifetime, really, isn't it? You get this big series which just kept gathering momentum year after year in the early days, and why wouldn't you take this opportunity?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to do it, because it was one of those things where they knew they wanted to do a feature script, and they'd known for a while that they had the canvas for it, and they took a good chunk of the script. Chris Carter wrote half of it in 10 days once he got back from Hawaii, sent it to Fox. And they said, yeah, okay, go and start thinking about how you do it. They hadn't officially greenlit it at that point, but they were like, here's a budget, here's how much you've got to work with, go away and start figuring it out. And that's what they did, you know? So yeah, before we do start digging into it, we thought we'd talk about the trailers, because there are multiple trailers for Fight the Future, most of which are on the Blu-ray that is available, and they all they've all got different sort of shades on the whole thing. So this is for the theatrical cut. There is the extended cut on the Blu-ray, but we thought we'd go with the theatrical cut because it's a bit easier. The extended cut does have, you know, good scenes on there and things like that, but it just makes a bit more sense to just do the theatrical stuff. So I mean, I had a little bit of a watch of all three of the trailers on the Blu-ray, and I don't know whether we got a different one to the US, Carl, but what did you guys think of the trailers? Do you feel that they did a good job of communicating the film, things like that?
Yeah, I did actually, and I'm not sure I ever saw the trailer or not. I really can't remember, because I assume it would have only been played before 15 rated films, and this would have been the first one of those I'd have watched in the cinema, so it may have been the first time I'd ever seen the trailer. Sitting down for this. The main thing that jumped out at me was the 1990s voiceover guy you get in all these trailers. You know, that's gone way out of fashion. You know, the kind of in a world where that bloke. I love that.
He had the same voice for every single movie. So whether it was the alien dark race are returning, or a mother has problems with her 2 children, same voice. He was amazing. I think he's died now. Trailer voiceover guy.
Way to bring it down, Tony.
Sorry. Well, Sarah, did you see the trailer before watching the movie? Did you see it in cinemas?
I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I know I probably peed myself a little when I did, because I mean, it's amazing. My best friend and I in high school, we would go to a movie every Friday. That was just kind of our thing. And so I'm sure at some point in one of those movies it came on, and I probably lost my mind. But yeah, I actually have a reel of the trailer. I can't remember which one. I think it's the one that starts off. Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, you told us this off air, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
Incredible.
I've kind of unrolled the first few frames once or twice just to kind of look at it a little bit, but I'm afraid to unroll it all the way, and it's probably... I need to take better care of it, but yeah.
You should donate it to Jim Thornton's preservation
I was
museum.
thinking about that.
He'd love you.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, it's kind of special, so...
Well, yeah.
I'll tell you what I thought was interesting about the trailers, though, is they don't really... They're kind of bigging up the X-Files brand more than kind of David and Gillian. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they're not named, you know, it's not like David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson. It's not that. It's in one of the trailers, in trailer B on the Blu-ray I've got, it's like a full minute before you see Mulder and Scully, actually. And I think, I don't know if they do it the same way these days, but I get the feeling they weren't really kind of considered big stars, you know, so I guess that's why they took that approach.
Yeah, this was just before, though, they started... I mean, arguably, Duchovny never really had that kind of movie career. You know, after the X-Files, he's never really become that kind of household name in that sense. And I think Gillian hasn't. You know, she chose, I think, to take more character roles and things like that as opposed to big leading roles. She is now, I'd say, quite a bit more famous than he is in terms of what her output. But it's interesting, in that they were never... I mean, do you remember at the time, all the rumours that they were going to have Jodie Foster and Richard Gere play them in the big screen film? That was genuinely considered, I think, you know, at one point.
Right?
And they were, and that they were a little bit like, why don't we just get like those guys to play them and like nobody will notice? It's like, I think they will.
That would have been terrible. Sorry, Jodie Foster.
You know?
But...
I mean, they would be good, famous lookalikes, obviously, you know, because Duchovny and Richard Gere do look very similar, especially young Richard Gere. And, like, Jodie Foster is, you know, Clarice Starling is the inspiration for Scully. So, you know, in another universe, they would have done a decent job, but they're not. They're not
It's not parallel universes, Tony.
No. Exactly.
It'll be interesting, though, won't it, in, like, 20 years? Like, you know how Brian De Palma did Mission Impossible? And they kill off the main character from the series. Can you imagine like a future X-Files film that makes, I don't know, Jeffrey Spender the main character or something? It'd be crazy.
Oh my god, yeah, true. I mean, the one that really I think would upset people is that you have a future X-Files film in which Mulder and Scully appear and one of them or both of them die. Like, you know, in a small...
Like
yeah. I'd say don't put it past them, seriously. You know, because I think it's more likely that you will get a future X-Files show or movie that has Duchovny and Anderson in it, but in a smaller guest role, you know, in some way. But who knows? But yeah, it is. You're right there, Carl. They don't front load those two, do they? They front load the brand of the X-Files, because I suppose at this point it was at its peak, wasn't it? You know, this was season 5. This was the height of the fandom. They were all over Rolling Stone, Duchovny and Anderson, and the show was, you know, it was what Game of Thrones has been to our last few years in terms of sheer scale. It was everywhere, and it broke into the mainstream. So this was a big deal. I always think when I'm watching these trailers, imagine how these would have been poured over these days by internet culture, you know, by people on YouTube, fan sites. You know, they would have eked every bit of speculation out of these frames, wouldn't they, and tried to piece together what this means, you know?
Yeah, definitely, because like when we first got the ability to rewatch films and stop and pause and rewind and stuff like that, that completely changed the way we analysed films and talked about them. And then it took a little while, didn't it, before you could do that for trailers as well. So you're totally right. You would have had, you know, it would have been all over the internet within minutes of the trailer, wouldn't it? It would have been scrutinised. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't do that, but I just liked the way the trailers were put together. I felt like they didn't give too much away. You know, it felt like it just gave you a flavour, and it was all rapidly cut together. So I didn't really feel like they spoiled the story or anything like that for this film.
I feel like at some point I probably would have tried to download the trailer on AOL or whatever, you remember? And it would have taken all day, but I would have stuck with it because, you know, I needed to do that exact thing. To just sit there and pick it apart and watch it 10,000 times in a row.
Because this was way before the age of YouTube. Well, a few years before YouTube anyway, before that all started to happen. So the only time like you say, the only time we saw these trailers was in front of a movie. And it's why, back then, especially, trailers were, you know, you had to be there for the trailers. You know, everyone was, you've got to be there for the trailers because you didn't want to miss them. Whereas these days, you know, if you catch the trailers in front of a film, great, but you don't have to worry because you can go home and watch all of them anyway. So it made it more special, I think, in front of a film. I remember seeing the Fight the Future trailer, the one that has all the stock footage at the start, and it's like they do that really cool thing of the 20th Century Fox, and then it sort of cuts to surveillance footage. It sort of blurs. That was very good effect, and then you get for years, the conspiracies have reigned across all that stuff while you see all the footage, and that was a great. It's only like a minute long, but it was great. I always remember watching that. You know, in so many times in films I was seeing that summer.
I like that because it transitions, doesn't it, from stock footage, and then you see the kids from the film. Yeah, and it kind of is still the same effect, and then it goes to kind of like that effect goes away, but it's kind of like the mix of, you know, reality and conspiracy and the world of the X-Files kind of jumbled up all together, and it seemed to work really well to me.
Well, what's cool about it as well is that you don't necessarily know it's an X-Files film until you hear Scully and you hear her going, Mulder.
That's my favorite part. It goes dark and you don't see anything, and then you hear Mulder. It's like, oh my gosh.
Well, exactly. Imagine that, right? Imagine if it's Comic-Con or whatever, and they would played that trailer, nobody knew what it was, and then you hear Scully going, Mulder, the place would erupt because you'd be like, it's an X-Files film! Like that, you know? It's such a shame that the show didn't exist in that way on the cinema screen at this point, because that kind of thing it'd be electric, you know? Anyway, was there anything from these trailers that you guys think didn't make it into the cut of the film? There's one frame in particular I don't think is in the film, but is there anything that leapt out at you guys?
No, but I know what you're going to say because I think you put it on the notes we were looking at earlier. Mm-hmm. But apart from that, no, it all seemed to be stuff that was familiar to me. So no, I think it's all in there. Apart from this one thing you're going to mention now,
Sarah, what about you? Before I say this one thing, is there anything that leapt out at you, or is it the same?
No, same. I didn't see.
The one thing I think isn't in the film is there's a frame, there's a shot of Mulder running like he's sort of running across a busy sort of Washington street without the. It's after he's escaped from the hospital, after he gets shot, and he takes the jacket off. Well, I think they reshot this. I think he originally came out of that hospital maybe without that jacket, and then he's running. And then the shot you do see, he ends up taking the jacket off and chucking it on the floor, which is weirder, if I'm honest. Because why do that with
Byers' jacket? Is it?
Yeah,
it doesn't
Byers,
fit. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it doesn't look like, you don't see that shot of him running across the road, and they make it look like an action shot in the trailer. Okay. It makes it look like it's a foot chase, you know. Yeah. So I think that's because the trailer's quite clever at how it edits certain things that aren't really an action sequence together to make them look like they're an action sequence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the only thing I spotted. But apart from that, it's good because usually sometimes you get trailers and there's loads of things in the trailer and you go, that wasn't in the film. So it's quite good that it's all there, really, and it gives a good appetite whetting. Well, anyway, now we've whetted everyone's appetite. Should we do this? Should we start talking about Fight the Future? I think we should. So, yay!
Epic moment. Here we go.
Here we go. You guys are going to be back for minute one and a very famous couple of fanfares that we're going to hear. So yeah, it'll be great to have you guys back then. So yeah, until our first minute kicks off of this massive enterprise, thanks for listening, and always remember, trust no one.